Okay, well, in my presentation, I'd like firstly to give you a very rapid overview and reminder of the Pembrokeshire Chariot Project, and then secondly, to give you an update on our progress over the past 2 years with an outline of our plans for presenting these discoveries in coming years. So the project all began with an exceptional discovery made by metal detectorist Mike Smith in February 2018, when he reported a number of exceptional decorated Iron Age chariot fittings from a Pembrokeshire field. And here you can see Mike at the centre of the slide with the photographs of 2 of the artefacts he sent me by email when he responsibly reported them as possible treasure finds. This rapidly led to a site visit with Mike to mark the find spot location of these finds, and also to the realization that there was a previously unrecorded Iron Age promontory fort in the immediate vicinity of the find spot. So, wanting to know more about the reason for the burial of these artifacts here, we commissioned Dr. Tim Young to undertake an initial geophysical survey over the find spot and adjacent to the fort. And so here at top left, you can see the survey plot he generated and the LiDAR aerial coverage, showing the 3 lines of fort ramparts cutting off the end of a promontory defined by 2 steep converging stream valleys. Remarkably, Tim identified that the finds had come from the centre of a circular ditched monument, itself located in a rectangular enclosure which had been added to the elaborate fort entrance. And at the top right, you can see one of the ramparts of the fort, the top of the rampart being over 4 meters higher than the ditch in front. So in June 2018, and as part of an ongoing treasure case, we undertook a week of preliminary excavation over the find spot, and we found a large sub-rectangular shaped pit at the center of the circular ring ditch towards the end of our week. And we discovered the tops of 2 iron tires, each relating to a chariot wheel. In other words, we realized that we discovered an Iron Age chariot burial where the chariot had been buried standing and whole. We decided at that stage to carefully backfill the grave with the intention of returning with a bigger team and at a future date. But in January 2019, the early artifact finds were declared treasure and purchased by Amgueddfa Cymru. Following this, we worked quickly to put together a project partnership with the aim of enabling the excavation of the chariot burial and an accompanying programme of community and volunteer engagements. We submitted a project grant application to the National Lottery Heritage Fund and were successful in achieving funding for the project. I'd like to acknowledge all of the partners and funding bodies in this slide. In approach, we said we wanted to work through partnership with other organisations, developing opportunities for participation, volunteering and community engagement. We particularly wanted to work with young people based at Pembrokeshire College, interested in their heritage, to offer them genuine opportunities to be involved with a major archaeological discovery on their doorstep, to be part of the team, to learn new skills, and to create film and archive footage. And this film and archive would become part of the national collection and would be core to presenting the project in years to come. So in March and early April 2019, we undertook 5 weeks of excavation of the burial. And you may remember that an important early discovery during the excavation and surviving surprisingly high up in the grave pit was a complete iron sword, here shown top left. This was located between the wheels over where the box platform of the chariot would once have been. We block lifted the sword and the adjacent artifacts so they could be x-rayed and excavated back at the museum. And here you can see the sword lifting process undertaken under the joint care of my colleagues Louise Mumford and Mark Lewis. Well, this slide shows the excavation, revealing the entire burial monument and the central burial pit, covered over with a shelter structure. At top right, you can see the plan of the archaeology as revealed. And on the on the southeast side of the monument was a wide entrance, suggesting that the ring ditch may have acted as a mortuary enclosure at the time of the burial. Soon after the burial was placed and mounded over, 3 further burials were placed around the monument. The main surviving archaeological features in the chariot pit were the 2 rock-cut slots into which the wheels of the chariot had been inserted. The chariot was buried complete, however, all its organic components had decayed in the acidic Pembrokeshire soil. Remarkably, though, the tyres and metal fittings associated with the wheel hubs had survived, and these were carefully lifted in segments for careful excavation and investigation back at the museum. Unfortunately, the human skeleton had not survived, leaving only a dark organic stain alongside the sword as a trace of where the body was once placed on the chariot platform. And at the bottom right, you can see the plan of the central grave. In June 2019, we commissioned TWI, Technology Centre Wales, to get the large chariot artefacts X-rayed and 3D scanned. Our student volunteers were involved to see the images as they were generated, and they were also able to visit the Archaeological Conservation Lab at the National Museum Cardiff to share in some preliminary conservation discoveries emerging. At the top middle, you can see one of the scan stills showing a lynch pin once securing a wheel to the axle of the chariot, and also with the bronze and iron wheel hub fittings showing as 2 rings within that shot. Which brings us back to the Pembrokeshire Archaeology Day in November 2019, when, if you remember, our volunteer students presented their film for the first time relating to their experience of the excavation. And this was very well received by the large audience who attended this popular event. We also had a stall in the exhibiting area where we sought feedback from people about how they would like the project to develop in the next stages. So in the past 2 years, what have we done and how has the project progressed? Well, first of all, there's been continuing conservation excavation and X-raying of the chariot artefacts through 2020. This was needed to allow the identification and listing of all the artefacts in the grave for a second treasure report on these finds for the coroner for Pembrokeshire, which I'm currently working to complete. The chariot artefacts have all been stabilised and packaged in dry sealed environments by conservator Louise Mumford. Until these artefacts have been declared treasure and acquired for Amgueddfa Cymru, we're not able to start work on their conservation analysis and cleaning. And this treasure process will be completed next year. 2 key finds were made during this process in 2020. Firstly, we now know the sword had a segmented horn handle and it was buried within a wooden scabbard, traces of which have been preserved in the mineralized corrosion on the blade surfaces. And at the top left, you can see an X-ray of the sword fragments, also with part of a bronze sword belt ring attached. Secondly, we now know that 2 or possibly 3 spears, each with socketed iron butts or ferrules and decorated with spiral-bound shaft fittings, were buried in the grave. And here you can see the X-rays of these fittings and their locations beside the burial and the sword. We think the missing spearheads themselves were either deliberately snapped off before burial or were subsequently disturbed and removed from the grave by more recent farming activity. For most of 2020 and into early this year, the project, funded via the National Heritage Lottery Fund, was severely disrupted and delayed by the emerging COVID-19 situation, with its lockdowns, faced changing work conditions and restrictions on social interactions. Unfortunately, the face-to-face events and meetings with communities were no longer possible as planned, And so we responded by developing more online resources and switching to purchasing resources with continuing positive future benefit to the project. The Lottery Fund approved these stages and agreed an extension of the funded project. This stage of the project ended in October last year, and we completed our final reporting to the lottery in March this year. On this slide, you can see that we commissioned Gerald Gilbert to make replicas of 2 of the decorated chariot fittings from the site. So at top left and right, you get a sense of how our large turret and decorated strap unions would once have originally looked. And chariot maker Robert Herford has also made us a replica chariot wheel. As part of the work needed in preparing the excavation towards publication, we commissioned researchers to write first assessments of the finds, samples, and environmental evidences retrieved from the site. These assessments have identified the work needed to write the full reports for inclusion in the final published report. And to illustrate this slide, I'm showing 2 pieces of work completed. Firstly, at top left, the geophysical survey plot in the field beyond the visible fort, and secondly, the ground contour survey of the 3 lines of upstanding ramparts for the fort on the right. One key discovery shown on the geophysics plot is the existence of 2 additional lines of outer ditches for the fort, which show there were a total of 5 lines of ditches and ramparts, the fort in one phase being nearly 3 times the area of the monument that is still visible to us today. So this was clearly a fort of some size and complexity. We were also able, with our lottery funding, to purchase all the conservation equipment that would be needed to be able to study and conserve the chariot artifact in the next stage of the project, including enhanced imaging equipment, a dry cabinet for storing conserved artifacts, and a washing tank and chemicals for cleaning and treating the iron artifacts. Last year, John Hewitt of PlanEd created an interactive project website that will be used and added to in future years, so interested members of the public can find out more about the site and its archaeological evidences. In its design, we wanted to create a menu of bite-sized learning elements so that individual users could find out about what particularly interested them, creating personal pathways through the site. Unfortunately, there has been an unavoidable delay in making this website live and accessible. However, we hope this will go live early next year. Another presentation strand we delivered, working with digital media company Tantrum, was the making of a film about archaeological conservation, using the Chariot project as a particular case study. And this was a real opportunity for my colleagues Louise and Mark to present their archaeological conservator roles at the museum and the techniques of analysis they use and evidences they look for to tell us more about the past. And this will also be added to the project website for public access early next year. Another resource we were able to create and fund through the project was a set of banners and 2 portable display cases, which could be used to create a pop-up display and an engagement setting in community venues during day events or workshops. The cases were designed so that their perspex lids stack inside the box, protecting the lid and for ease of transporting. And you can see one of these in its packed form at the bottom right of the slide. Across the top of the slide, you can see the set of banners designed and created, giving a backdrop and identity for project engagements. We very much hope to get some good use out of these going forward, and as the COVID restrictions ease. In November and December 2020, the project team supported and contributed to an intensive schedule of filming for 3 documentary programs commissioned about this chariot burial discovery. This included documentaries for S4C, Smithsonian Channel, and Discovery Channel. These slides show a pony pair and a driver steering an Iron Age chariot replica during filming for these programs. This replica, made by chariot maker Robert Herford, uses replica chariot fittings as found in South Wales. Over the summer and autumn this year, we've recently been in discussions with Dr. Melanie Giles of the University of Manchester, and we've now just been given the go-ahead to jointly develop an ambitious research funding application to enable the final stage of the project in coming years. And I'm grateful to Mel for framing the last two slides of this presentation so that her voice now starts to come through and contribute to the project. Mel is already one of our project academic advisors, so she already has good knowledge and experience of the project to date, which helps. In the final stage of the project, we want to make and enable a number of things to happen, including public consultation, co-curation, design and creativity, working with Pembrokeshire groups, communities and volunteers. If possible, we would like to present this discovery first here in Pembrokeshire, perhaps at Oriela Park in St David's. We know that we need to undertake a programme of research-led conservation analysis and cleaning of the chariot finds to feed new insight into the technology and construction of the chariot. Allied with this and deploying a craft ethnography approach, it would be wonderful to commission and record the techniques and thinking of a maker involved in the creation of a full-scale replica chariot. This could be used to inform wider understanding of British Iron Age chariots, to make sense of the archaeological evidences we've found, and to act as an engaging interpretation resource in future displays and event days. We need to complete the publication of the site excavations and surveys so that the find can be peer-reviewed, more widely understood and interrogated. Finally, we need to relate our story to the wider cultural context, both in terms of what it tells us of this Iron Age people and society on the northwestern edge of an expanding Roman Empire, but also in terms of chariots and burials in northwestern Europe, to ensure its international significance is understood. To do this, in collaboration with Mel Giles at the University of Manchester, we intend to jointly submit a funding bid early in 2022 to the Arts and Humanities Research Council for a 3.5-year-long project. If successful, this would run from September 2022 to early 26 and would continue to involve partnership working with our project partners and advisors. This would draw upon Mel's research expertise in this field, her track record and dynamism. And in this slide, I hope that you can get a flavour of her interests, projects and outputs. She is an inspiring and engaging communicator with an interest in and commitment to working with museums and creative practitioners. So to conclude today, we now have our work cut out to enable all this to happen for communities in Pembrokeshire, in Wales and across Europe. As Mel neatly puts it, the challenge is to make this project matter on so many different levels. Thank you.